Hello and welcome back to Seconds Out. My name is Ayman Khan, here to get some insights into boxing legend Floyd Mayweather taking on Deji, as well as other movements within the YouTube scene. Here with me is the one and only journalist Donagh Corby of The Mirror. Donagh, how are you doing?
Eamon, thank you very much for having me. I'm doing fantastic. I just watched a great press conference between seemingly Anthony Taylor and Floyd Mayweather more than Deji and Floyd Mayweather. But yeah, it was a very entertaining evening of events. So I'm very happy to be joining you.
Very happy to have you on Seconds Out here indeed as well. I've just given you a little couple of words there of an introduction from my own words, but from yourself, talk to me about kind of yourself within the YouTube scene and your work within The Mirror as well.
Yeah, so basically, for people who don't know, I don't know who doesn't know. I'm a huge star. I mean, but no, seriously, I'm a journalist from Dublin. I've been writing about sport for the last 5 or 6 years. I used to write for the Irish Daily Mirror about kind of everything, and then in 2021, I moved to the UK Mirror, and I write about boxing and MMA. And one of the beats that I'm particularly keen on is this YouTuber scene, this influencer scene. I think it's a fascinating market. I think that other outlets don't really cover it as seriously as they should, and so I wanted to sort of give a real journalist perspective on it, and that's kind of the beat that I'm following at the moment, as well as covering real sports where I'm in America right now to cover legitimate UFC fights and legitimate PFL fights, as well as also Misfits boxing in Texas. So yeah, there's a bit of everything in what I cover.
But everything we saw a little bit of everything as well in that Mayweather versus Deji press
Yeah.
conference that York Hall, the spit and sawdust of UK boxing. Let's rewind slightly a little bit. I remember you kind of telling me a while back about you having this crazy fight that you'd just been heard that you'd heard about, and I was like, "What is this fight?" And you said it was Mayweather versus Deji. So tell me, way back then, what what was going on that led us to this fight happening, and as well, what could have been if there were any other fights that were potentially lined up for Mayweather before he settled on Deji.
Yeah, so I got a very random phone call at one point a few months ago from somebody based around someone who was involved in organizing these kinds of fights in Dubai, and they were talking to me about something else, like another thing that was happening, and they said, and it's going to be on the same event as Floyd Mayweather versus Deji, and I thought, geez, you're burying the lead here to this person. I thought Floyd's going to fight Deji. And I thought that's a bit strange. And they said, yeah, it's all done. They just need to get the thing done. So I got straight on the phone to some people who would know about these sorts of things, and I texted someone and I said, "Is this true that Mayweather's going to fight Deji?" And their response was, "Who told you that?" Which, if it's not true, they would say that's BS. And I think in my text I had written something like, I think I can't remember the wording, but I was like, I feel stupid even asking you this. This is so outlandish. I know it's probably BS, but I have to ask. And yeah, it's very legitimate that Floyd basically he was signed with Global Titans to do a couple of fights. Apparently, he's not involved in the running of Global Titans, which I'm not so sure about, but it seems that he's not involved there. So he had a deal to do a fight, and they were looking at Gibb initially because he's obviously from the Middle East. He's from Saudi Arabia, born, obviously raised in the UK. And they were looking at maybe Gibb because he was a big name and he's got a bit about him skill wise, but he had another fight lined up. And Gibbs' manager is Liam Chivers from OP Talent, and he's also Deji's manager. So he basically suggested to them, well, look, I've got this other guy who's got an even bigger following, just won his last fight, huge interest in him, and Mayweather's team and Global Titans basically said, yeah, this sounds great. And that's how the fight came about. It was done very quickly. I guess the Queen's passing may have stalled it by a day or two, but generally the timeline stayed about as it was. And they got it over the line with quite a bit of ease, I think.
Now, I know Floyd has been doing these exhibitions for quite a while, and he's kind of had a mixed bag of opponents, varying between Logan Paul to stars over in Japan to Don Moore to now Deji. But do you think Floyd is likely, given that maybe Gibb was an opponent that was put out there first of all, he might stay within this influencer boxing scene and ride this out for as much money as he can, being Floyd
Yeah,
Moneymaker that he is?
it appears that would be what makes the most sense. I even think this MMA fighter that he fought in Japan, I believe he is quite well known on social media. I believe he's got like a bit of a following in Japan. I don't know too much about him, but I hear that that's the case. So I think ideally he will look for people who are able to help to push the promotion and people with big followings as opposed to, anything competitive or anything like that. I know that he doesn't seem keen on even doing like rematches of old fights that he did. People like he doesn't want to do a Pacquiao exhibition or he doesn't want to do a Ricky Hatton exhibition necessarily. Amir Khan was a fight that never happened, but it could happen now as an exhibition. He doesn't seem keen on that. So yeah, I would imagine he has pretty explicitly said it that he wants to fight the people with whom he can make the most money and get hurt the least, and that would be a YouTuber in most cases.
Now, you and I were both witnesses to Deji's first win.
We were there.
We were there ringside for that one. But what do you make of Deji's chances? He seemed to sell himself short in the press conference in terms of his intent there. This is an exhibition, of course, but
Yeah.
he didn't seem too confident, I'd say, in his chances at that press conference.
Yeah, it was a very strange. I texted you at one point. I was like, they're trying to promote our main event with questions like, "Do you think you're even going to land one punch?" Like that's a very strange way to go about pushing an event like this. I think Deji has obviously he's done a lot of personal growth over the last few years. He's had to overcome a lot of they said there are a lot of hardships. That seems like a big word for it, but I think he's had to overcome a lot of mental struggles, and he's been growing up kind of in the shadow of obviously a very famous brother, gone through some legal issues in the past as well, and some very public fallings out with different famous YouTubers and stuff. So I think he's kind of had to grow up a lot in recent years, and I think he's concerned about, if he were 100% honest, I think he would admit that he's concerned about saying things that are going to come back and bite him, or or being overly showman like, and then getting memed. Like if he says, "Oh, I'm going to knock out Mayweather," and then Mayweather decides he's going to show up and go even 60 or 70% and flatlines him, that wouldn't be good. So I think the Deji's kind of a little concerned about going over the top. Like he really, really pushed that Jake Paul fight hard, and then he kind of got beat up, and he had the towel was thrown in. And he didn't do that so much for the other two guys. I think he didn't really push the Vinny thing, but I think he was expected to win, and that was quite embarrassing for him. And then really embarrassing when he lost the third fight to Wasabi. Very like a less close fight maybe than the scorecards indicated. I thought Wasabi won more or less every round, and then yeah, look, he was very quiet going into the Fuzi fight, like almost a mute, like he almost didn't talk at all, which is it's kind of frustrating when you're covering YouTubers because the whole reason that they're fighting is because they're supposed to be entertaining, supposed to be entertainers. But I think Deji is look, he's been going through a growing up period. He's quite young, and I think that he just doesn't want to speak out of turn or show any disrespect to a legend like Floyd Mayweather, who's given him a big opportunity.
You just mentioned in your previous answer before that about Mayweather and potential fights that could happen. Mayweather did drop in that press conference about a coming back to the UK and having a fight after that. Because he dropped the name Ricky Hatton and Ricky Hatton's having this exhibition with Marco Antonio Barrera, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of thought maybe they might flirt with an idea of a Mayweather Hatton 2 and get them in an exhibition. But do you maybe think something like that, something like that's not possible, and he might go a different route in the UK?
I mean, if he were to come to the UK, that would be a monstrous fight, even as a silly exhibition. That like February is quite early, but that would be like a stadium fight, I would think. Mayweather versus Hatton 2, they're both in their 40s, because particularly if the idea is that maybe Ricky might win this one, is if he looks very good against Barrera, who's sort of more legitimate than any of these guys that Mayweather gets in there with, and and there's a bit of a story they could tell there. That would be a absolutely monumental fight. He was, like Floyd was saying, he never fought out of America during his career. So I think if he could come to the UK, it would be amazing. But I haven't heard anything like that. I haven't even heard that he was coming to the UK. That was something that he dropped kind of out of nowhere during the press conference. I had heard that he had something already pretty much lined up for Dubai or Saudi in March, but it seems that he has a plan for February as well. He could do these every week if he wanted to, and
Mm.
if he was really having that bad of money problems, he probably would do these every week or at least every month or whatever. So I think he just does these for a bit of fun and obviously to keep his income flowing and keep himself fit. And you know what? It's a good scene. And yeah, I think to answer your initial question, it would be cool to see Hatton versus Mayweather, or Mayweather versus Hatton too. in the UK, and I think it would be a monumentally ginormous fight.
Well, those press conferences are made for someone outside of the headlining act to steal a bit of the show as well. And Anthony Taylor for sure did do that. He took the mic and lambasted his former foe Tommy Fury and goaded him in trying to get a rematch between him and Tommy Fury. But what do you make of maybe Taylor's progression so far as a fighter, and then Tommy Fury with the situation with not fighting Jake Paul, taking on Paul Bamba in this fight coming up next?
Yeah, well, look, Tommy's found himself in a very strange situation. I heard that when Global Titans first got in touch with him, the plan was for him to fight Tyron Woodley, which would seem to make a lot of sense. You know, Tommy doesn't really fight guys who are that good generally. Tyron is 0-2, which wouldn't be, the worst guy that Tommy's fought, and he's a bit of a challenge, but they weren't really keen on that fight. I don't know. There's conflicting reports about what happened there, but I think that Tommy's team were never keen on fighting Woodley. He was then offered all sorts of different fights there. I think Aaron Chalmers was a name that was thrown about. I think Harley Ben has come out publicly and said he was one of the names that was in the mix, and then they ended up going for this Paul Bamba, who's kind of a relative unknown. He's got a bit about him, Paul Bamba, and he seems like a good lad and a bit of a character, but at the same time, the facts are the facts, and he started boxing professionally last year. He's 5-2. Look at those two losses. I mean, first off, there's no footage of him anywhere. He tends to fight kind of in Mexico. The one time he fought in the United States, he lost to a guy who was 1-4. So we're not talking about a very high level of opposition here. And I think I think that Tommy does need to start now that he's got that fame. I mean, he's still very, very young. People forget he's like 23 years old, or maybe even younger. But he does need, with this whole Jake thing, I mean, it hasn't been a good look for him these last few years. He hasn't been super active. He's pulled out of the two biggest fights that he's been involved in. And really, he's like, he's going to find it tough to come back from this now. Luckily, like I say, he is young, and boxing fans are super fickle. So if he gets himself a big stoppage win over Paul Bamba, which I'd imagine is the plan, and then he goes and fights Jake, I hear that that's in the works for either the Middle East or the UK in February. That would be a huge fight. And I think that, yeah, he just needs to actually get into the ring with someone like Jake and get that win that he claims he would get,
Well, someone who did get into the ring with Jake last weekend was Anderson Silva, MMA legend. Had a background in boxing, had a few fights recently in boxing as well. Donagh, can you tell me as to what the pay-per-view numbers are in terms of how well that fight did over in America?
Yeah, so it appears Jake has come out and said publicly that it appears that the number is in the region of 200,000 to 300,000. That's sort of what I'm hearing. But pay-per-view numbers on traditional Showtime or traditional carriers in the US tend to historically take a while to come in. So I'm not hearing any like official numbers yet. But yeah, the region that he has claimed is 200,000 to 300,000, which isn't great. He says that it was because of this incident where Anderson misspoke in an interview and said that he'd been knocked out twice during sparring, which would disqualify him from the fight and would mean that the fight was cancelled. And given that Jake's last, I mean, if you count the first Tommy fight, he did end up fighting on December 18th, but his last three fights that he was planning have all been called off. You got the first Tommy fight, second Tommy fight, Hasim Rahman fight. So you're looking at someone who was about to develop a bit of a reputation as someone who can't get an event through. And I think he says that himself, that's what hurt him. But it did happen. It was a big show. It appeared they managed to shift a few tickets. Towards the end, it looked decent on television, and I think they probably shifted a few pay-per-views. But it would have been even bigger. It would have been ginormous, probably 500,000 if that hadn't happened during fight week. I don't know about 500,000, but definitely in the 400s.
When it comes to territory of Jake Paul fights, people have their doubts in terms of Jake Paul as a legitimate fighter, but they also have their doubts in terms of knockouts or knockdowns. In this case, they did with Tyron Woodley when he finished him off with the right hand, and now with this knockdown, people have been doing the slow mos and a bit of controversy around it of some on the internet. What have you made of that? What do you make of that knockdown?
I mean, I think it's hysterical, to be honest. Like I look at the footage that they put as like their film that they're rewatching over and over again, and I watch it and go, yeah, that just looks like a normal knockdown. Like, what am I supposed to be seeing here? They don't there's nothing circled. Like, I also think that a lot of this stuff stems from like the no knockout clause. Remember that was a big controversy. The first Woodley fight that Woodley was told he couldn't knock him out. That stems from Dylan Dance. Like we're talking about someone who is a famous MMA and boxing troll, like somebody who like it's like well that was a good example. Like Dylan Dennis has a similar level of like credibility. Obviously, he's a very credible fighter in MMA, but his credibility as someone who like knows the inside track on things, similar to like really nice Derek or something on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like not exactly. He's like he jokes, he trolls, he kind of mocks these people, and he's obviously got involved in this conspiracy theory, and I just think I think that the thing is that there's nothing you could do if you're like a hardcore Jake Paul hater. Let's say you're a big KSI fan or something, or maybe you're just a boxing purist. There's nothing I can tell you that to convince you that that was a real knockdown. But the truth is, it was a real knockdown, and I think anybody who kind of watches it objectively kind of can see that. And I don't see a great deal of controversy there.
Irrespective of that, then all YouTube boxing fans or influencers or people who follow this scene, they all want to see what this natural trajectory seems to be, which is the end game of a KSI Jake Paul or Jake Paul or KSI. Is that in the immediate kind of path or viewing in yourself, maybe in the next year or two? Do you think we'll actually see that fight?
I would like to. I mean, it's a massive fight. People talk about Wembley. That's a lot of seats. I mean, there's really very little indication that Jake can draw that many seats or the KSI can either. I mean, KSI is in the UK a considerably bigger draw than Jake is in the US, if you get what I'm saying. Like, I think the bigger star in the fight, I think the A side, because these things aren't necessarily about fighting ability, I believe the A side is probably KSI in that fight because he's more famous. I think he probably, if they had an event on the exact same day against an opponent of the exact same level, the exact same tier of fame, one in say New York or California or Vegas, and one in London, I guarantee KSI's would sell better. I think. I say I guarantee, and then I say I think, but I think the KSI's would sell better. So I think he probably is the A side for that fight, which Jake claims is not an issue, and it shouldn't be an issue because Jake has like monumental, seemingly insurmountable advantages as an athlete in terms of like his ability to win the fight. I find it very difficult to imagine a situation where KSI would win that fight or where he would even put in a particularly good showing. You're talking about someone who, he's fought for 3 times and then he did 2. I don't even know, like they weren't really exhibited. What would you call those things we saw in August? They weren't fights, were they?
No.
Like they weren't, they're not on any box rec. There's no record of them anywhere, but he's done 3 fights and he's done 2 of whatever he did on in August, and he didn't look particularly impressive in August. I would say like he clearly showed improvements, but he didn't show anything where I'd go, oh, Jake's susceptible to that kind of punch that he was landing. The way he worked the body there, I think, and if you watch how Jake was against Woodley or whatever, that he would get in there. I just didn't see that. So it's hard to imagine a situation where KSI could win that fight. Look, anything is possible, right? Like that's the big cliche. And boxing's, it's a 2-horse race. Very rarely are there draws, but you know what I'm saying. There's, and one cliche, one punch, can change everything. But I just think it kind of has to happen. But I also would imagine, like, I don't believe it to be part of the Jake Paul story in the same way I don't think it's really that big of a part of the KSI story. Like, I think the boxing is like a piece of KSI's thing, but he's also a huge, like a monumentally big star as a musician. Not to mention, every weekend they're putting out these Sidemen Sunday videos with tens of millions of views. He's like a huge megastar. So, boxing's part of it. And I think that's also part of the reason why I don't believe he can win the fight. I believe that even if he were able to train as, like, he's not able to train as much as Jake. He just doesn't have, there's not enough hours in the day. Jake does nothing but box and run his company better. And, he does some little business things on the side, but generally, he spends hours and hours in the gym. My friend Anthony Taylor, who we were talking about earlier, he was in camp with him in Puerto Rico for the first Woodley fight. He was saying that Jake is just obsessively in the gym, which even if KSI wanted to be, even if KSI had that amount of dedication, he probably does have that amount of dedication. He doesn't have the hours in the day because he's also got to be a platinum selling rapper. and he's also got to be the biggest YouTuber in the UK, and he's also got all these other responsibilities, and Jake doesn't have those responsibilities. So I just don't think that there's a way that he could, like, he's going to probably put out another single before he fights in January, I would think, or at least in the same time. So like he's got a lot of stuff going on. Christmas is going to be busy for him. You know how these celebrities get at Christmas time with all the promotion and all the radio shows and everything. He's going to find this period difficult, as well as he has a fight. So he's probably going to fight someone I would think not that great in January, someone who he's probably going to be able to beat. And then maybe try to build for a Jake fight. He might do one more before the end of the year and then do Jake towards the end or in the summertime. But yeah, I think that fight should happen, and hopefully as soon as possible, because I kind of want to see both of them move on.
Just mentioning about KSI's next fight, that being in January, there's been an opponent being teased. With it being someone like a Dylan Dennis or a Joe Fournier, or if you watch the little clip, including Christian HD, an opponent beginning with a name or has the initial Z somewhere, which KSI I think has now since debunked there. But do you have an idea of what the realm or ballpark of an opponent might look like?
The last I heard from my sources inside, it's veering towards, I think, Joe Fournier. I think that in an ideal world they would have Woodley, but I'm not sure that deal is going to get done. There's a variety of reasons for that. I think Joe Fournier would be viewed as not a very good opponent, but Joe Fournier would be viewed as kind of like the opposite of Anthony Taylor, where he's not that good, but he has a lot of upside in terms of he's got an 11-0 pro boxing record, and the consensus is that he went the distance in that exhibition with David Haye, and he anytime we've seen him, he's been beating people up. So I think Fournier is a very low risk, high reward type of fight. So that's probably the way they're gonna edge towards. I don't believe the deal's got to be done soon. I got to get in touch with some people over the next few days. It has to be done soon because they're announcing on November 19th in Austin. But yeah, I haven't heard, but I know that if I were to guess, if I were to put money on it, if I were to go down to the bookies and bet on KSI's next opponent, I would probably be veering towards Joe Fournier right now. Second, then Tyron Woodley. And I think Dylan Dennis might fight Logan on that card, or he might not fight him. He might not fight at all. He might fight in Bellator again. That's what Scott Coker told me in September when I was covering Bellator Dublin. I asked him, have these guys even contacted you yet? Because they're talking about a January card. And he said there'd been no contact. Now, Mams Taylor has since told me on the record in a discussion that's going to be out soon on Mirror Fighting. He has told me that there have been discussions that after that interview I did with Scott, he decided to pick up the phone and call him, and he sort of said he kind of teased that maybe there'll be business done in the future, and it may not necessarily be January. It could be January, maybe. But I think that Dennis is a good guy. They could get involved at some point. He's probably not a very credible, like with a casual fan, probably not a super credible opponent. Then again, the last two, I do think KSI needs to do something because the last two were like a complete disaster in terms of credibility. So I think he'll probably be aware of that, and Fournier seems to make the most sense. I wouldn't like Andrew Tate either, but that's way off. That's definitely not happening.
Now, as we draw this interview to a close, it's gone very well. Pending, of course, when the interview closes, you might start hurling a bit of abuse at me, True Geordie found himself on the end of with Tyson Fury. As an accredited journalist like yourself, I wondered what you made of True Geordie's line of questioning, some of the criticism, some of the praise that he's got from that interview, and then maybe Tyson Fury's reaction to that as well.
I mean, look, bro, I think True Geordie's an interesting character, man. I wouldn't say that I'm the biggest fan of his videos. I wouldn't say that I'm a major hater or anything, but I think interesting line of questioning to kick it off with asking about KSI. That's an interesting way to go at Tyson Fury early. I get what he's doing and I get what he's saying, and he's done a reaction video to it, and he's admitted that the only reason he's done the reaction video is to make money, which fair play to him, but I think, it seemed like it was a relatively run-of-the-mill interview. Tyson did seem to be in weird form pretty much from the start. He also told them they had 40 minutes, and then Geordie seemed to want to wrap it up around 15 minutes in. So I would think that there's a third person on that Zoom call who was giving them the old, wrap it up. But I think, very strange behavior from Tyson. I don't understand why someone in PR at Queensbury or someone involved in public relations for Fury. And because I've seen Frank Warren getting a bit prickly about this fight as well. And I'm like, I don't understand why someone in PR for these people hasn't just sat them down and said, look, every single interview you do is going to be negative. So be prepared for that and be ready for it. And if you're not prepared for it, then don't do it. Then just simply, don't do the interview. It's not that bad of a big of a concept. The fight's evidently, allegedly selling very well. That's what they're putting out there. That it seems to be selling a lot of tickets. We'll see on fight night how true that is. But it was weird for Tyson to be involved at all in that way, and weird reaction. He says something like fair play or good man at the end,
Mm.
and then immediately goes on to calling him weird insults too, calling him bald. It's like, okay, Tyson Fury's calling him bald. Okay, that's interesting. That like it's like if I were to, I'm not going to get into it, but it's very strange carry on from Tyson. So yeah, very weird, and I think fair play to True Geordie. He's a true YouTuber because he's milking it.
Final thing from me, Misfits puts on its third card, its third out in Austin, Texas, which is headlined by Hasim Rahman Jr. taking on Vitor Belfort. Also featuring on that undercard is Ice Poseidon versus Brandon Buckingham, as well as another myriad of slew of influencers there. Anything to look out for on that card there?
Yeah, like you say, Ice Poseidon and Brandon Buckingham. Once again, this is very biased from me to say, pro Buckingham. People know that I get on very well with Brandon, but that's going to be a good fight. Your main event is fascinating. Belfort versus Rahman Jr. Another one where you would think that Rahman Jr. should have the advantage. It's a good card. It's an interesting card. It's kind of like there's no real standout that makes you go, oh, that's interesting. Like that's even in the Sheffield one, the Astrid Wed and Keeley fight, there was like a little hook there to grab you, like, whoa, I know, like there's some history here and there's some whatever, and we really haven't seen that from really anyone on this card. I think the Dean the Great and Waleed Shark is going to be, it should be in terms of influencer boxing, technically a showcase of two of the most proficient fighters there are. But yeah, so yeah, I guess the Dean the Great fight is probably the one to look out for. But yeah, fascinating main event. Hasim Rahman Jr. has made a name for himself through not even fighting Jake. I mean, he's come out looking very good from the sparring footage. I was surprised that Jake would put that out given what was on the tape. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting event, and the big push that they're telling people to watch it for is that KSI will be announcing his and Logan Paul's opponents for this big January card, which appears to be January 14th. They're saying Houston, Texas, but I had heard a different venue, and it would make more sense if KSI is involved to do it on the East Coast, where the time difference is only 5 hours, as opposed to Texas is Central Time, 6 hours, and certainly the West Coast will be out at 8 hours. It's just a wild difference. So, yeah, it's the big draw for this card, I guess, is that KSI is going to be there and he's going to be telling you who he's fighting. But hopefully, I'll know that before then, and I'll be breaking the news.
Do you expect it to do as well as the previous outings for Misfits?
Well, obviously, the first one was like a monumental success in every metric. In pay per view numbers, by the way, everyone is watching. It was a big pay per view, regardless of some other stuff. But yeah, it's I think the second show did okay. I think the streaming numbers and stuff were good. It's an interesting one because you're going fully to the US now, and it's going to be a different time zone. Not going to be that many UK fans watching. There aren't that many like household names on there, so it's all on these sort of smaller influencers. King Kenny and DK Money. You wonder like what's King Kenny's draw going to be like. Fighting against someone like DK Money, who's sort of on the smaller end of the creator sphere, and you wonder like how much are those skills going to show, because we really have no idea how good DK is. He's fought once about 2 years ago. Then he got headbutted in his next fight, and it got stopped after a couple of seconds. So that's going to be interesting. But yeah, I think it should do as well. Like on paper, it's as good a card as Sheffield, I think, in terms of like boxing ability. But I know that's for influencer boxing, not exactly the truth. So yeah, it should. I would think it'll be the lowest performing of the three, but it shouldn't be like it should be in or around the same as Sheffield. And then apparently they've got a monumental card coming up in January. That's what they keep telling me. They keep telling me it's going to be the biggest show in his own history. It's going to be bigger than Canelo Triple G3. And so I guess having two Brits fight in the US is going to be that. I don't know. Like Logan, obviously Logan's a big draw, and so it's going to be a big event. And obviously Misfits are involved in some way with this Mayweather card. Their name is all over the postering. So I'm not sure what exactly the nature of that deal is, but it should be. To answer your question shortly, yeah, it should be. It should do as well as these influencer cards tend to do. And being free on DAZN with your subscription should mean that a lot of people will watch it.
Donagh, it's been a real distinct pleasure speaking to you on Seconds Out. Where can people find you? Of course, on Seconds Out, another interview, breaking news as you get it. But where can they find you on social media to find the latest breaking news in the YouTube insider scene?
Yeah, so Twitter's probably where I'm most active at Donagh Corby _ on Twitter, at Donagh Corby on Instagram. I don't really post that much influencer news on there, but sometimes I do. And then just follow Mirror Fighting on every platform. That's where everything is. That's where, like, sometimes if I miss a tweet when I've done a story or whatever, it's Mirror Fighting, at Mirror Fighting on every platform is where you want to go. And yeah, it's been a distinct pleasure talking to you too, Ames, my sparring partner, my rival from the club back in Dublin. So yeah, it's been good.
I was waiting for you to get there, and a real pleasure. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks, mate.